Welcome back to the Forbidden News Update. I'm Chris Matthew. With me, as usual, is Cory Hughes. How are you doing today, Cory?
Good, thank you.
Very good. Now, before we get started, I want to thank everyone that's made donations. You guys are really helping this show stay alive. You guys are really awesome. If you'd like to make a donation, help us out. The links are in the description. Also, please subscribe on lbry.com. That's our official backup channel. And check out My Patriot Supply. Everyone right now should have an emergency food supply. It's crazy right now. 2020 was the beginning of very unsure times. And right now, you can get $70 off a 2-week and $100 off a 4-week supply of their awesome food. Stays good 25 years in storage. Just click the link in the description or visit preparewithfkn.com to get yours today. Now, I've just compiled some information from various articles about the big tech takeover we're kind of in the midst of. Cory, what do you have for us today?
Well, we're going to be talking about the true origins of Thanksgiving and how there's somewhat of a movement to stop celebrating Thanksgiving because all of it's a blatant lie. So culturally and from the government perspective, I mean, I don't think those guys would ever really lie to us.
Of course not.
Definitely. So we're going to talk about that. Also, real quick, everybody who's signed up to use one of these bullshit COVID tracking apps, it was released a couple days ago that the Australian spy agency incidentally collected everyone's data from all of these different COVID-19 tracking apps. So if you're dumb enough to have put your name on that freaking list, it serves you right. And I hope that nobody else decides to participate in any of these tracking technologies, particularly these Android and iPhone apps that are coming out with. Because as you should know, everyone has a backdoor to these things. So
yeah, definitely. And that kind of ties into what I'm going to be talking about today. Amongst the many changes taking place with the U.S., our economy, growth of gigantic internet platforms like Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, and Twitter, they were already huge before the COVID op. Now they are causing imminent failure for many other smaller platforms. As convenient as this technology is this where we want to go? They hold not only massive economic power, but they also wield political control over political communication. They dominate the information and the coordination of every major agenda set to roll out. Now, while we're told that the EU has sought to enforce antitrust laws against the platforms, it looks like we're only seeing more growth, power, and control. Over the past 2 years, the Federal Trade Commission and a coalition of state attorney generals have supposedly initiated investigations into potential abuses of the platform's monopoly power. And in October, the Justice Department filed an antitrust suit against Google. Now, although there is an emerging consensus that big tech companies pose a threat to democracy, who's really going to stop it? Some have argued that the government needs to break up Facebook and Google. Others have called just for more stringent regulations to limit the company's exploitation of data. But if you're a content creator or you're using these platforms, you now have to self-regulate. You have to take down what's considered dangerous content. And the economy has steadily grown when it comes to pharmaceutical companies, media outlets, and technology companies. And the consumers are just suffering. Amazon, for instance, they shuttered mom and pop retail stores, main streets, big box retailers. But everyone uses Amazon, especially during a pandemic. Who doesn't need their entire lives delivered right to their door right now? The economic case for reining in big tech is overwhelming, but the majority of the population is content and completely on board with the direction we're headed. The social media platforms, they have algorithms that now have the ability to show user information that aims to confirm users' pre-existing beliefs or amplify or silence voices that they don't want. Have these platforms already amassed too much power over humanity to stop? like Amazon, Facebook, and Google. They collect so much information about people's lives, and they're using it against us. They know who people's friends and family are. They know about people's income and possessions, and many of the most intimate details of people's lives. The giants have already amassed vast quantities of consumer data, and the new Department of Justice lawsuit indicates that Google's business model relies on uh, gathering generated data from different products. Gmail, Google Chrome, Google Maps, its search engine, they all combine to reveal massive amounts of information.
Well, one thing I want to point out also is if you go back in time and you look at the lawsuit against Microsoft when Netscape was still a big competitive browser, the antitrust lawsuit that came about basically said that Microsoft cannot bundle their own Internet Explorer into their operating systems because then it eliminates competition and eliminates choice. But when you get an Android phone today, you have Google baked right into everything.
Right.
I minimize that by using Chinese phones. Honestly, my last like 3 phones have been Chinese phones because I trust the Chinese with my information way more than I trust the United States government or Google. But yeah, so the reason that all these companies are straight up violating antitrust and anti-competition laws and getting away with it is because all of our politicians are bought and paid for, right? Law means nothing anymore because you can pay a judge. You know, you give a judge a certain position under the premise that he's going to find certain ways in certain cases, and they do that. So that's really, to me, the appointment of local judges and the appointment of district court judges. Those are the most important selections that are made because then when a law gets challenged, if it's genuinely unlawful and you actually have a judge who gives a shit about the law, he'll overturn the law. But the reality is all of our judges have been bought and paid for 50 fucking years.
Right.
You know, it's all political ideologies, but those political ideologies are still all controlled by the same people, right? So
yeah.
Then things got way worse after Kennedy. If you look at like the number of lawsuits and antitrust cases that have come since Kennedy, it is way down compared to what it was before. So yeah, this is a lawless nation. But if you're a big shot, you can get away with it. If you're not a big shot, you can't get away with it.
Yeah.
So,
and free speech, it's already gone.
Well, that's another thing. The government can't censor you. They know that. They can't come in and shut down a newspaper. So what do? They allowed and funded these platforms to grow to become the town square. And then they can just outsource the censorship to these companies, which they funded to begin with, right? This is how they silence voices. And this is where antitrust laws really becomes important because let's say you and I try to start our own Twitter. Right, we're going to run into every freaking obstacle that there's going to be, and Twitter never had to. Twitter just paid off whoever they had to pay off, hired who they had to hire. Hell, I think it was a year or two ago they found that one of the executives at Twitter was actually British intelligence. He was a British intelligence agent.
The governments are supposedly launching antitrust actions against big tech platforms.
It's not going to go anywhere.
US, because they're just going to be litigated for years to come.
And not only that, they'll pay off the right people.
Right.
In
Germany, they've already passed a law that criminalizes the propagation of fake news. I'm wondering.
Right, well, they've had that forever
who decides what's fake,
Going back to the 1980s, they had laws passed where you can't even talk about the Holocaust. You cannot say that the gas chambers are all fake. If you say that in Germany, you'll go to prison. Doesn't matter if you're correct. You're not allowed to talk about that. There are things they have been censoring that stuff for decades. And really, when you go back to the origins of German intelligence, modern German intelligence, it was all formed by the Nazis. The Nazis were given Germany back, plain and simple.
Yeah.
Reinhard Gehlen made the BND his kind of home base, so he reestablished the BND, which was the German intelligence, in 1947. And he put all of his Nazi buddies who were running it before back in charge, right? So Germany has done a good job of laying low over the years in as far as outright censorship and outright shifting towards more fascist ideologies in government. But still, there have been things that they had to keep a lid on. They had to keep a lid on Holocaust because once you peel off that scab, it unleashes, the whole world will come to understand that everything's BS once you understand that the Holocaust is BS.
Yeah.
Right. So, and Germany was right up in the middle of that. But yeah, today, these it's more like the corporations control the companies instead of vice versa.
Yeah. And I mean, the question to me is, what can we do? Like, it's a huge, massive train headed towards us. If we lay down, it just keeps rolling. If we stand up together, we could stop it, sustain damages. But people are already just, so deep into it. They rely on this big tech so much, and most people are fine with what's happening. If it wasn't for Facebook or YouTube, none of you would even know about Forbidden Knowledge News. It's like a huge double-edged sword. I really don't know what the solution is. I know if we keep heading in this direction, it's going to be a dark place, cut off from sharing information. But all I can say is support your independent platforms, support your independent media. If people are coming up with these independent sites and you enjoy it, you like the information coming out with it, or resonates with you, support them. Don't support these big companies anymore. That's, I think, what the answer is. The only thing we can do to start with, at least.
Yeah, and I got to say, like, big props to everyone who donated over the past month or two, because that was what allowed us to relocate out of the middle of BFE, Louisiana, to Denver, Colorado, where we have many, many battles to fight ahead of us. The crackdowns here on COVID-19 have been out of control for no fucking reason. The numbers here don't support it, right? Something like, if you include healthcare staff, over 65% of all the COVID-19 deaths in Colorado were in long-term care facilities. Okay. Hello. They're locking everyone down, shutting down businesses, destroying the economy to save a bunch of fucking old people. Okay. Sorry. I have no sympathy. Old people get sick and die every year. And this year we're trending less deaths overall for the country for the year than we did in 2018 and 2019. Okay. So even with this goddamn pandemic, deaths are down. There's no reason for any of this. And Colorado is getting hit really freaking hard for no reason. And there are actually whole cities like Longmont acting out and like saying, nope, shove your regulations up your ass. We're not going to do it. And we're going to open our businesses. And, it's really becoming a battle between the like health inspectors, especially for restaurants. Health inspectors got their orders, come and shut everyone down if they don't do the masks and follow the rules. But if you follow the rules, you go broke. This is a war. This is the modern day war fought internally. This is the closest thing to civil war we're actually ever going to see.
Yeah, I always say I think we're already in the midst of World War III. It's just war against us. It's war against the people, them against us.
Well, here's the thing. Like, empires always fall. Every single empire we've ever had has fallen. The people always win in the end. It's just how bloody of a battle will it be between now and then? And I have a feeling it's going to get fierce because you got people who are pissed off. You got people like me who work in media, who have many outlets to reach a lot of people. But then you got people who don't have that, but they got guns and they'll go shoot somebody. Those days are coming. Like, you're going to see some really violent stuff happen in the near future because everything that these governors are doing as far as COVID goes is completely contradictory to even what the World Health Organization is saying. And they're always full of shit, right? But even they're saying lockdowns don't work. They're I don't understand, like, the upper echelons, the different factions really at the very top who are.
They can't get their shit together.
There's some major factional infighting going on, and that's the only thing I can determine from it. The closer you get to the top of the pyramid, it's like, who's really pulling the strings here?
Yeah,
like a Kaiser Sose kind of moment.
Well, I mean, that's the direction we're headed. Like I said, we have to. Hopefully, it doesn't have to get to the violence. It doesn't have to get to that. But we gotta start somewhere. We have to actually start fighting somewhere because too many people are complacent with this right now.
Well, it's funny because like I see some of these protests, and the protests aren't organized enough to become revolutions. They're just not. But you see all these businesses getting burnt down, and then the news gets on and says, well, these businesses had nothing to do with your oppression, so why are you burning down these businesses? Well, that's false. Every single business out there that has a storefront that pays people less than what they should be making, which is under $20 an hour, which if we kept up a minimum wage over the years, we'd be up at $22, $23 an hour for minimum wage. Okay. So when you have these companies that come in, even small 1 or 2 people companies who come in and they pay their people $10 an hour, then when they get their shit burnt down, yeah, you played a part in the establishment suppression of people's livelihoods, straight up. So I don't have sympathy for any businesses that get burnt to the ground because they become part of the establishment. Unless you're paying your people, unless the CEO is making as much as his employees are making, then I don't feel any sympathy. The days of back in the 50s, you had CEOs who would make 3, 4, or 5 times the amount that their lowest paid worker would make. These days, that number is 300 to 500 times what the lowest paid workers make. So yeah, there's definitely an imbalance, and definitely I'm all for violence and burning shit to the ground, because these people will not get the point otherwise. You cannot argue with these people. They have the best lawyers. You cannot outspend these people. They have the most money. The only thing that they understand is their head rolling in the fucking street. And these days are coming. They are coming, and it's going to really drastically change everything for everyone. It's not something to look forward to, but it is coming.
Yeah. And on that note, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Let's get into a little bit of history of Thanksgiving here. So, Cory, what have you got for us today? What'd you come up with?
I just have just a couple notes, nothing too deep. We're just going to go over the real origins of Thanksgiving. Let me see if I can screen share this here.
Okay. Yeah, you're good now.
All right. All right. This land is their land, the true story of Thanksgiving. And I borrowed the title from an article that I covered in it. Screen sharing, okay?
That looks good.
All right. So, once again, let me see if I can move your faces off the screen. Nope. Hang on one sec. I got to get rid of this little box. I hate this little box.
I think it's a hide panel or hide something in your view options.
All right. So the true story behind Thanksgiving is a bloody one, and some people say it's time to cancel the holiday. Well, yeah. If you go into all of our holidays, they're all the same thing. Christmas was created by Coca-Cola, so all of our traditions are bullshit. American school children are usually taught the tradition dates back to the Pilgrims, English religious dissenters who helped to establish the Plymouth Colony in present-day Massachusetts in 1620. As the story goes, friendly local Native Americans swooped in to teach the struggling colonists how to survive in the New World. Then everyone got together to celebrate with a feast in 1621. Attendees included at least 90 men from the Wampanoag tribe, and the 50 or so surviving Mayflower passengers, according to Time. The bash lasted 3 days and featured a menu including deer, fowl, and corn, according to Smithsonian Magazine. In reality, Thanksgiving feasts predate Plymouth. Numerous localities have tried to claim the first Thanksgiving for themselves, and the peace brokered at Plymouth didn't last long. The real story behind the holiday is so dark, in fact, that some people are rethinking how they celebrate the holiday or whether they should at all. All right, so the Plymouth Thanksgiving of 1621 was not the first. Settlers in Berkeley 100 in Virginia decided to celebrate their arrival with an annual Thanksgiving back in 1619, according to National Geographic. Though the Washingtonian reported the meal was probably little more than some oysters and ham thrown together. Decades before that, Spanish settlers and members of the Siloy tribe broke bread with salted pork, garbanzo beans, and a mass in 1565 Florida, according to the National Park Service. Our modern definition of Thanksgiving revolves around eating turkey, but in past centuries, it was more of an occasion for religious observance. The storied 1621 Plymouth festivities live on in popular memory, but the Pilgrims themselves would have most likely considered their sober 1623 day of prayer the first true Thanksgiving, according to the History of Massachusetts blog. Others pinpoint 1637 as the true origin of Thanksgiving, owing to the fact that the Massachusetts colony governor, John Winthrop, declared a day to celebrate colonial soldiers who had just slaughtered hundreds of Indian men, women, and children. All right, so tensions grew between the Wampanoag and English settlers years after the Plymouth Thanksgiving. Massaswat, Sachem, or paramount chief of the Wampanoag, sorry, I'm butchering all these names, proved to be a crucial ally to the English settlers in the years after the establishment of Plymouth. He set up an exclusive trade pact with the newcomers and allied them against the French and other local tribes like the Narragansett of Massachusetts, but the alliance became strained over time. In Thanksgiving pageants held at schools across the United States, children don headdresses colored with craft store feathers and share tables with classmates wearing black construction paper hats. It's a tradition that pulls on a history passed down through the generations of what happened in Plymouth. Local Native Americans welcomed the courageous pioneering Pilgrims, to a celebratory feast. But as David Silverman writes in his new book, This Land is Their Land, The Wampanoag Indians, Plymouth Colony, and the Troubled History of Thanksgiving, much of that story is a myth riddled with historical inaccuracies. Beyond that, Silverman argues that the telling and retelling of these falsehoods is deeply harmful to the Wampanoag Indians, whose lives and society were forever damaged after the English arrived in Plymouth. So yes, so white people come somewhere and then everything goes to shit after that. It's a recurring theme throughout history.
Yeah, that's the one recurring theme that you can always look forward to is
white people suck more than anybody is the bottom line. Like, we just go in and we take because we feel we're entitled because we suck. Silverman's book focuses on the Wampanoags. When the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth in 1620, the sachem or chief, O.S. Mequin, offered new arrivals an entente primarily as a way to protect the Wampanoags against their rivals, the Narragansetts. For 50 years, the alliance was tested by colonial land expansion, the spread of disease, and the exploitation of resources on Wampanoag land. Then tensions ignited into war, known as King Philip's War, or the Great Narragansett War. The conflict devastated the Wampanoags and forever shifted the balance of power in favor of European arrivals. Wampanoags today remember the Pilgrims' entry to their homeland as a day of deep mourning, rather than a moment of giving thanks.
I try to think about what our world would be like if our true history was actually taught to children as they're growing up through the education system. I mean,
I don't know. People would maybe be worse. Maybe they would think it's okay to go around you want something, you can kill somebody and take it.
You could be right. You never know how those things would have gone. Maybe they wanted to keep us away from this information for a reason, but still, I think that knowing would be better than not because they've held back the truth for too long anyway.
Yeah, well, they can't say, oh, well, we didn't like his policies, so our intelligence agency murdered Kennedy, took over our country, and shared it with another foreign nation. They can't tell us that. There'd be fucking revolution in the streets, right? I've had a great many conversations with Wampanoag people in which they talk about how burdensome Thanksgiving is for them, particularly for their kids. Wampanoag adults have memories of being a kid during Thanksgiving season, sitting in school, feeling invisible, and having to wade through the nonsense that teachers were shoveling their way. They felt like their people's history, as they understood it, was being misrepresented. They felt that not only their classes, but society in general was making light of historical trauma, which weighs around their neck like a millstone. Those stories really resonated with me, and that's from David Silverman, who actually this is a new book called This Land is Their Land, and it really goes into detail on the specifics of the relationship between the colonizers and the native Indians. Just the fact that we ever called them Indians just goes to show how fucking stupid we are. They thought they were in India, so they called everyone Indians. Right. No, dummy. Our history is such bullshit. All right, Plymouth Colony was established in 1620 with significant early help from local Indians, particularly Squanto and Massasauga. Subsequent colonists found Salem, Boston, and many small towns around Massachusetts Bay between 1628 and 1640 during a time of increased English immigration. The colonists progressively expanded throughout the territories of several Algonquin speaking tribes in the region prior to King Philip's War. Tensions fluctuated between Indian tribes and the colonists, but relations were generally peaceful. The Rhode Island, Plymouth, Massachusetts Bay, Connecticut, and New Haven colonies each developed separate relations with the Wampanoags, Nipmucs, Narragansetts, Mohegans, Pequots, and other tribes of New England whose territories historically had differing boundaries. Many of the neighboring tribes had been traditional competitors and enemies. As the colonial population increased, the New Englanders expanded their settlements along the region's coastal plain up to the Connecticut River Valley. By 1675, they'd established a few small towns in the interior between Boston and the Connecticut River settlements. The Wampanoag tribe, under Metacomet's leadership, had entered into an agreement with the Plymouth Colony and believed that they could rely on them for protection. However, in the decades preceding the war, it became clear to them that the treaty did not mean to the colonists were not allowed to settle in the new territories. They signed a treaty with the colonists, but they didn't realize that the treaty did not address their continued expansion into their territories. King Philip's War, sometimes called the First Indian War, Metacom's War, Metacomet's War, Metacomet's Rebellion, or Metacom's Rebellion, was an armed conflict, 1675 to 1678, between indigenous inhabitants of New England and New England colonists and their indigenous allies. The war is named for Metacom, the Wampanoag chief who adopted the name Philip because of the friendly relations between his father, Massasoit, and the Mayflower Pilgrims. The war continued in the most northern reaches of New England until the signing of the Treaty of Casco Bay in April of 1678. Massasoit had maintained a long-standing alliance with the colonists. Metacom, 1638 to 1676, was his younger son, and he became tribal chief in 1662 after Massasoit's death. Metacom, however, forewent his father's alliance between the Wampanoags and the colonists after repeated violations by the colonists. The colonists insisted that the peace agreement in 1671 should include the surrender of Indian guns. Then 3 Wampanoags were hanged in Plymouth Colony in 1675 for the murder of another Wampanoag, which increased the tensions. Indian raiding parties attacked homesteads and villages throughout Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Maine over the next 6 months, and the colonial militia retaliated. The Narragansetts remained neutral, but several individual Narragansetts participated in raids of colonial strongholds and militia, so colonial leaders deemed them to be in violation of peace treaties. All right, failure of diplomacy. King Philip's seat, a meeting place on Mount Hope, Rhode Island, Metacomet became sachem of the Pokanoket and Grand Sachem of the Wampanoags Confederacy in 1662 after the death of his older brother, Grand Sachem Wamsuta, called Alexander by the colonists, who had succeeded their father, Massasoit, dead in 1661, as chief. Metacomet was well known to the colonists before his ascension as paramount chief to the Wampanoags, but he distrusted the colonists. The Plymouth colonists had passed laws making it illegal to have commerce with the Wampanoags. They learned that Wamsuta had sold a parcel of land to Roger Williams. So Governor Josiah Winslow had Wamsuta arrested, even though the Wampanoags who lived outside of colonist jurisdiction were not accountable to Plymouth colony laws. Metacomet began negotiating with the other Algonquin tribes against the Plymouth colony soon after defeating his father and his brother, after the death of his father and brother. So yeah, we cut deals and then we reneged on them, and that's another theme you'll find throughout history. And the war dragged on. The war between local tribes and the settlers encompassed the well-known events of the raid on Swansea, the siege of Brookfield, the Battle of Bloody Brook, attack on Springfield, the Great Swamp Fight, the Mohawk Intervention, Lancaster Raid, Plymouth Plantation Campaign, attack on Sudbury, Battle of Turner's Falls, Second Battle of Nipsachuk, and culminating in the Battle of Mount Hope.
Now, honestly, looking at all those, I can honestly tell you I've never even heard maybe 1 or 2 of those battles in my entire life, and throughout my entire education. This is not ever talked about in any history classes.
Yeah, because when you really explain the history of America and the founding of North America and all this, it's always based on domination and survival of the fittest. And if we can kill you and take it from you, we're going to. And that's kind of where we find ourselves in the modern world, because you got to think, half the reason we went into goddamn Afghanistan had nothing to do with 9/11, had nothing to do with terrorism. It had to do with reaping the land of very rare earth minerals, right? So in Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia and these parts of the Middle East, you are able to extract minerals from the ground that are used in our cell phones and technologies and things people can't even pronounce or have ever heard of. But we can't just go and just take from people, right? So we have to come up with these covers. So we cover over this war on terrorism, and while we're there, we might as well just take all these resources, right?
When they need democracy, they need our help with that.
Right, they need our help with democracy. Right, we've never had in this country, no democracy in the United States. It's kind of hilarious. Maybe one day, once upon a time, at the local level, sure, but post like Andrew Jackson, our government's been bought by different interests. But Yes. So you never hear about these things because our entire foundation is one of blood and savagery. And we pretend to walk around like we're a civilized people. And we can only do that if we ignore this history, you know? But this is continuing to this very day. The reason that we're in there bombing 11 countries on behalf of Israel, half of it is for their imperialist motivations. And the other half is we can go in and reap all these very rare minerals that our industries rely on that are bottlenecked through these, what we would consider primitive countries, right? So we just go and take it. Not much has changed. But see, the way the world is set up today, we have all the countries, we have sovereign countries, we have peace treaties between them. You can't violate people's land and this and that, even though we do all the time. And so we have this like framework where you have to be polite about how you go about your looting another country, right? It's really very artificial. But still, that's what's going on. We can't just go in and take the land. There's not much land left in the world for us to take. We've taken it all, right? It's all been worked out. Right. But we still need things from these various countries. And so we still invade their sovereignty and then be like, oh, we're the good guys. We're here for democracy. Yeah, well, fuck us.
Yeah.
We're the worst. We created Nazis. You know, we're the worst. The United States of America is the worst totalitarian empire I think we've ever seen. People just are comfortable with the level of totalitarianism they can deal with.
Yeah, most people don't realize that they live in a country which is just a big military industrial corporation, basically.
Yeah. Well, you got to think it goes back to intelligence, and it goes back to Alan Dulles and these guys back in the 40s, and who they really served. You know, when you look at Alan Dulles, who was, you know, primary founder of the CIA with Donovan, go back and look at his relationships. They were all relationships with banks, and they were all relationships with huge industry, you know, communications and information. And that's who the CIA really is loyal to. But you got to think, you know, they've had how many people in office that worked for the CIA? Shit, when Johnson took over after Kennedy, the 4 guys who surrounded him, Jack Valente and Lem Johns and all these guys, they all worked for the CIA, right? So fundamentally, another reason, and I always drift back to Kennedy, you know, because it's the most important event in world history. And so basically what you have is, why would our own intelligence agency be willing to team up with a foreign nation to overthrow our own leader? And the answer to that's very simple, is because they really took hands-on control of the government at that time, you know, on behalf of, and follow out the orders of a foreign nation. So that's why the CIA was so willing to allow another country to come in and fucking kill our president. So now let me get back to the subject at hand, because I could go off on Kennedy for fucking 6 hours. I got so much good Kennedy stuff this week. I'm finally compiling all my notes that I've been going, that I've got 10,000 screenshots. You know, it takes forever to sort through them. But I'm finally pulling together some stuff, and I've got tons of information nobody knows about Kennedy. So it's all going to be in my book. You got to pre-order my book, or else you ain't going to get a book. That's how that's going to go. All right. So Metacomet's allies began to desert him, and more than 400 had surrendered to the colonists by early July. Metacomet took refuge in the Assawamsett swamp below Providence, and the colonists formed raiding parties of militia and Indian allies. Metacomet was killed by one of these teams when he was tracked down by Captain Benjamin Church and Captain Josiah Standish of the Plymouth Colony militia at Mount Hope in Bristol, Rhode Island. He was shot and killed by an Indian named John Alderman on August 12, 1676. Metacomet's corpse was beheaded, then drawn and quartered, a traditional treatment of criminals at this time, and his head was displayed in Plymouth for a generation. So that's what we did to these people. We came in, we took their land, and then we hunted down their leader, cut his head off, and put it on a pike for all to see for fucking 20 years. That is the real meaning of Thanksgiving.
Yeah. We just become slightly more civilized since then.
I do believe that is it. It was just a very short kind of overview of the real history of what went on in that day, because it had nothing to do with enjoying a meal with some happy Indians who were there for us. You know, I really have to think it was more curiosity. They never saw any white man before, so we got all these white people coming in. It's more of like a curiosity than anything else.
Right.
Like, what are these people? Are they here to hurt us? They're here to harm us? What's the deal? You know, and then I think they had some their own political motives, more for protection against other tribes. They thought these people coming in with guns, we can get guns from them, protect us from these other tribes. But like anything else, we are a virus. And so we enter into an organism and then we take it over for ourselves, killing the organism in the process. And that is what we've been seeing for the last 250 years.
And as far as holidays go, instead of just, having some kind of celebration just because we care about people or for something like that, we take a historical event and we twist it and we market it and they profit from it and it becomes a holiday. So,
right. And this goes directly back into the rewriting of history, right? It's always written by the victor, right? But then you can have history set in stone, and then 20 years later, like today, you have people trying to rewrite history, right? You have back to COVID, you've got all kinds of coronavirus research that's been done for decades that you can't find anymore. It's been hidden. You know what I mean? Because it contradicts the current narrative. But fortunately, we live in the digital age. We can catch them as they do it. I've screenshotted websites and information that I've gone back to later, and the website's just completely gone. So yeah. The rewriting of history is understanding how history gets rewritten is crucial to understanding who is rewriting it, and then you can kind of understand the bigger picture of why it's rewritten.
yeah.
And it is rewritten just to keep you buying iPhones and tuning into the Kardashians and whatever the fuck else. Leave the, just go with the flow, right? Don't think, just be a cog in the machine. Don't be a human with a mind and a will. Just go with the flow, go with the program, and they'll take over. So I was never really against like the universal basic income, really. But when I start to see it in actual effect and why it's happening and how it's going to happen, I have to say I've kind of turned my tune on that one.
Yeah.
Because that's communism and that's slavery. And who started communism? I'll wait. Go look it up. Who started communism? That's the people who's running the world today. Okay. And that's why they're kind of shifting back to this. So yeah, for once, I thought it was a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea anymore. I think I'd rather be fucking poor and on the street than taking their hand out and having to get a vaccine or some other bullshit. I don't jump through anyone's hoops.
Right.
And I will be homeless one day, probably because of that.
I think the only thing we can do right now is support independent platforms and try and get involved locally as much as possible, because that's where you start to make a difference in your local politics, your local areas. Hell, I mean, if more people became involved with local politics, maybe more things would change. People are just too complacent right now and are too comfortable getting their Amazon delivered to their house. And
60% of American households have Amazon Prime. 60%. I think it's only like 70% have running water, right? like 60% have Amazon Prime. And here's like the entire business model of Amazon is it's illegal. It should have been kicked a long time ago. Their entire model was, let's lose money for a decade, put all these other businesses out of business, and then we'll control multiple markets. And that's what they did. It started with bookstores. Then it went to like, bigger shelf item stores, right? Toy stores, gone. I worked for KB Toys back in the day. I was put out of business by Amazon, and they make it so cheap. And you pay your $12 a month, $15 a month, and you get all the fucking everything. You get like all the movies, you get the music, you get the delivery for free. I mean, like they make it so good an offer. Who the hell can say no, right? Who can say no? Even me, who I freaking hate all this shit. It's way too good. It's way too good,
Yeah, and it doesn't give you any other options. But meanwhile, everywhere you travel in the country, there's boarded up stores. There's no, you don't see anybody congregating outside. There's no concerts. The restaurants are dying. It's going to be a different world. I mean, we're already in a different world, but it's changing so rapidly right now. And
I've driven across this country probably 4 or 5 times in the past 2 years, like one end to the other. And I can tell you, the goddamn 90% of this country is fucking vacant shithole. Really, it is. It's small towns that you're lucky if you have a gas station that's open past 7 o'clock. It's unbelievable. The quality of life for people who stay in those towns is minimal. Yeah. I mean, the entire country has congregated towards cities, right? And now what they do with COVID, they shut down cities. This is the evolution of the United States of America is really disheartening.
It is.
You come to understand how it came about, and then how, like, starting with the fucking Pilgrims. You can start with the Pilgrims and the Indians, and then track that over the last couple hundred years to where we're at today, and it is a cesspool of corruption, and like Ben Kenobi said, like never has there been a more wretched hive of scum and villainy, and that is the United States of America. no question. These other countries that we demonize, like they learned it from us, right? They learned it by watching us. It was like those drug commercials in the 80s. I learned it by watching you, Dad, right? It's the same thing, right?
That's a good comparison. Yeah.
Yeah, and then once we get in relationships with these countries like Israel, then we form these like throw mama from the train relationships, right? You do terrorism over here for us, and we'll go invade countries for you over there, right? So we kind of keep each other. The plausible deniability is in place. Like if there's one term everybody should remember for the rest of their goddamn life, it's plausible deniability. Get that shit tattooed across your forehead, right? So it's that important. Every single thing that we do, every lie they tell us, the way that the whole global structure works is to maintain plausible deniability. That's it.
Yeah. The only good thing is, I mean, we still got this platform right now, and people are starting to listen more. So the more we can get this message out, the longer these platforms can stay up, and we can spread this message and get more people to wake up to it, the better chance we have. So I think that's the answer. Just support your independent platforms as much as possible. Any final word?
I'm a critic, big time, of even my own work, and so like there's like 3 people out there in the independent media world who I like, and everyone else promotes the same old garbage. Really, like I don't get involved with any of the alien stuff. I don't get involved with any of the weird spiritual stuff. I'm a history guy. I like proof. I like to know what's real and what's not, and facts and this and that. And so, there's not a lot of people who focus on that. And too many people get lost in this like 5G, coronavirus, blah, blah, blah. No, man, when you start to really dig into the origins of COVID-19, 5G doesn't have any fucking room for anything in there at all. Okay.
Right.
You get into how they spliced HIV, 3 different slices of HIV into COVID and SIV and all these other things. What they did was they designed a virus that actually attacks your chromosomes and injects itself into your chromosomes. And by splicing HIV in there, it makes the adaptation of the coronavirus to human cells much easier, right? That's why people in the beginning were getting they were getting crazy symptoms. Like shit, it's like, what? You bled out your eyes? Like, oh my God, like just crazy shit that no one's ever heard of.
Right.
There's no room for 5G in there. There's just not. Sorry. That's a CIA conspiracy, so don't go down those roads. Don't follow crazy. And remember, the CIA hires people and they put them to work spitting out garbage all day long.
Yeah. Now, I will say this. I agree with you, to a certain extent. I think, if something resonates with you, take a look at it, do your research. Don't just take anyone's word for it. But
Right.
The beauty of this show is, I have people like yourself, Cory, who are strictly historians and don't get into any of the woo-woo spiritual stuff. But on the other hand, I do cover all of that as well because I myself do. I enjoy this.
Right.
And I have a wide variety of guests, and I think that's what's the beauty of this show is I will cover anything and everything just to get as much information and let you, the audience, decide what resonates with you.
Right, but there's a lot of things like I haven't you have people on who have actually decent information and are experts in their field, and I haven't seen anybody come on pushing any nonsensical conspiracy theories like 5G will fry your brain with COVID-19, right? So, that's the thing. Like when I don't like it when people are on the right trail of real information, but then they're distracted by some nonsense, like the 5G thing. Forget about 5G. Okay, yes, it's not good for us. We all know that. Totally separate conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, once again, thank you, Cory. Thank everyone for joining us, and we'll be back tomorrow night with a new episode. Everyone, happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next time.